Hey, it's Nathan. Quick question before we start. When you drive to work tomorrow, who made sure the road would hold you? Somebody did. Somebody always does. There's a whole category of people whose entire job is walking the dangerous ground first so the rest of us never have to think about it. And tonight's story is about what happens when the worst family in one small town decided to hurt the son of one of those men. A 13-year-old boy run down by a gravel truck. Not once, twice. The men who did it were so untouchable in their county that they texted the boy's father, a soldier deployed half a world away, and told him, more or less, tough luck. Roads are dangerous. Stay deployed. What they didn't understand was what that soldier did for a living. His job title, his actual military specialty, was clearing roads, finding the thing hidden in the gravel that kills people, digging it out, and making the route safe. His commanding officer read that text message in a plywood office 11 time zones away, handed the phone back, and gave an order I still think about. Take the entire team. Buckle up. This one's about physics, patience, and the worst possible family to teach about accidents. Here's the story. Sergeant First Class Orrin Bellamy had spent 19 years learning to read a road the way other men read a newspaper. He was a route clearance platoon sergeant, which is the Army's way of saying that when a convoy has to travel a stretch of ground where somebody wants Americans dead, Orrin's people go down it first. Slow, methodical, eyes on every seam in the asphalt, every disturbed patch of gravel, every culvert. His soldiers liked to joke that the whole job was one sentence: we walk the road first so nobody else gets hurt. 19 years, 3 theaters, not one man lost under him, a statistic he carried more carefully than any medal. If you want to understand what happened in Arkansas, you need to see him work once. 4 months before this story began, on a nameless supply route his platoon had swept 40 times, Orrin stopped a 14-vehicle convoy in 106-degree heat because a patch of gravel looked combed, not disturbed. Combed, the grains lying in a direction the wind didn't blow. His lieutenant saw nothing. The dogs smelled nothing. The metal detectors, nothing, because there was no metal, just a plastic jug, a pressure plate of 2 saw blades and a sponge, and 40 pounds of homemade explosive buried by somebody patient. Orrin lay on his stomach in the heat for 50 minutes, reading the dirt grain by grain, and excavated it with a paintbrush and a length of hooked wire. Then he photographed everything, logged everything, sketched the emplacer's technique in a green notebook he'd carried for a decade, because route clearance has one commandment above all: the road will tell you who hurt it, if you're humble enough to ask slowly. His soldiers called that notebook the receipts book. They were only half joking. Men who tried to shortcut the road, Orrin had seen buried. Men who listened to it grew old. He intended to grow old. The team was the other thing you'd need to see. Route clearance isn't a job you do alone. It's a family trade practiced in public, everyone's life resting on the discipline of the man ahead. Kona Iosefa had turned down drill sergeant twice to stay with the platoon. Harlow Finch had been a 19-year-old failure to launch playing flight simulators in his mother's basement in Ohio until the Army handed him actual aircraft the size of dinner plates and discovered he could map a valley to the centimeter before breakfast. Cutter Boyle had driven everything with wheels, tracked or wrecked, on 4 continents. Malia Tuck had put 2 of them back together at various times and reminded them of it at cards. 8 people who trusted each other at the level of footsteps. Remember that too. He'd grown up in Cotter's Mill, Arkansas, a town of 4,000 strung along State Route 20 where it drops out of the hills in a long 6% slope everybody just calls the grade. His father had driven a school bus there for 30 years. Orrin could still hear him. A road doesn't kill people, son. Decisions kill people. The road just keeps the receipts. The receipts. Remember that. Orrin had married Lorelei Prine the summer he made sergeant, and for a while it was good. And then it was less good, and by the time their son Tobin was 8, it was over in every way that mattered. The divorce, when it came, was quiet. What wasn't quiet was Lorelei's family. The Prins ran Cotter's Mill the way a landlord runs a building. Not loved, but paid. Prine brothers hauling in gravel, the quarry above town, 40 trucks, the county roadwork contracts, the school board, and, people said carefully, the sheriff's re-election accounts. Old Aldous Prine had built it. His sons ran it. Judson, the eldest, who wore rimless glasses and did the paperwork. Denton, who drove and drank and had a temper with a 2-second fuse. Early, who followed Denton around like a dog follows a smell, and Mose, the dispatcher, who could make a logbook say whatever the family needed it to say. You have to understand what 40 years of that had done to Cotter's Mill. The Prinz didn't just employ 110 people. They'd perfected something quieter, the economics of looking away. The rotary pancake breakfast, Prine Brothers, printed right on the banner. The new scoreboard, Prine Brothers. Half the county's road contracts, the concrete for the church annex, the sheriff's campaign, the loan that saved the diner in 2019. When a Prine truck clipped Wade Kanoski's fence and then his shoulder in 2017, Wade got a settlement in 9 days flat, hand-delivered, with a friendly reminder that his brother hauled for them. The Kanoskis moved to Missouri. When old Mrs. Teagle wrote a letter to the paper about brake noise on the grade at 5 a.m., her trash service, a Prine subsidiary, developed mysterious scheduling problems for a year. Nothing you could sue over. Nothing you could even name out loud without sounding paranoid. Just weather. The Prinz had made themselves weather, and you don't testify against weather. Lorelei had grown up inside that, the only daughter, the family's respectable face, school board, church choir, the one Prine nobody crossed the street to avoid. Orrin had spent years believing she was different, and then one Thanksgiving he'd watched Aldous tell her to redo a seating chart with one look, and understood that in that family there were no different ones. There were only assigned positions. Hers was, make it look normal. He'd filed for divorce 18 months later for smaller reasons that all turned out to be that reason wearing different coats. The one fight he lost was the school year custody. The family courts like mothers with deep roots, and no roots in Arkansas ran deeper than the Prinz. Tobin stayed with his mother during the school year. That was the deal, and Orrin hated it, and there was nothing to be done about it from a cot in a connex on the other side of the planet. They talked every Sunday on a screen. Tobin was 13 now, all elbows and cowlicks, obsessed with his bike, saving feed store delivery money for a dirt bike he had extremely specific opinions about. Every call ended the same way. An old joke between them from a documentary they'd watched about Orrin's job. Clear the route, Dad. Roger, bud. Route clear. On the second Tuesday of September, at 6:40 in the morning, Tobin Bellamy was walking his bike across the marked crossing where Quarry Road meets Route 20, on his way to load the day's deliveries, when a Prine Brothers gravel truck came down out of the fog with its running lights off and hit him. The truck stopped, sat there a moment, engine idling, half a ton of nothing happening, and 31 days would pass before anyone but the driver knew this. It shifted into reverse, and came back. A man walking his dog found Tobin in the ditch 20 minutes later. The truck was gone. What followed happened fast, the way small-town machinery moves when it already knows the answer it wants. Sheriff Dual Pogue's office worked the scene for barely 2 hours. No skid marks were photographed, no measurements taken. The report, filed before noon, called it a single-vehicle pedestrian accident. Cause: child darted into roadway in fog. Driver unknown, unlikely to be identified. There were 4 Prine trucks on that road that morning. Nobody was breathalyzed. Nobody's truck was inspected. And on the witness line, one statement, neat and notarized. The boy was always careless on that bike. Signed, Lorelei Prine. His own mother. Tobin lived. That sentence cost 3 surgeons most of a day. Shattered pelvis. Both femurs. A lacerated liver. A bruised spine, a collapsed lung. The injury pattern, one trauma surgeon noted in the chart with a kind of quiet fury, of 2 separate impact events. He came up out of sedation on the 4th day with a ventilator tube down his throat, and when they finally weaned him off it and his father's face appeared on a nurse's tablet from 11 time zones away, Tobin didn't say hi. He'd been saving something. He whispered it, because a whisper was all he had. Dad. They reversed. To check. Orrin didn't move, didn't blink. Route clearance men are very good at not moving while their whole world detonates. He had been living the previous 11 days on 90-second updates in a dead-aired hallway between missions. The surgeries, the second surgeries, the machine breathing for his boy while he stood in a plywood booth 11 time zones away with his palm flat on a screen. Malia Tuck had gotten him through it, translating every chart update the hospital emailed, telling him which numbers to fear and which to ignore, until the platoon's entire evening routine reorganized itself around the 1900 call to Arkansas. The night they extubated Tobin, 8 route clearance engineers stood outside the comms hut in the dark, not talking, waiting for a thumbs up through the window. So when the boy finally spoke, He wasn't speaking only to his father. He was, though nobody had planned it, briefing the unit. "There's more," Tobin whispered. The window came down. Denton looked right at me. He said, "Soldier's kid. Nobody investigates accidents." And Uncle Early laughed. That night, Orrin's phone lit up with a text from a number he hadn't seen in 4 years. Aldous Prine. 11 words, composed, he had no doubt, with lawyers in mind. Deniable, folksy, and precisely understood by both men. Heard about the boy. Roads are dangerous out here. Stay deployed. Orrin read it maybe 40 times. Then he did the most important thing he would do in this entire story. The thing that separates this story from 100 uglier ones. He did not book a flight. He did not call the Prinz. He walked across the gravel lot to the command hut, knocked, laid the phone on Captain Alonzo Frey's plywood desk without one word of preamble, and stood at ease while his commander read. Frey read it twice, read the hospital email, looked at the crossing photos Orrin had pulled from the county's own traffic page. He was quiet for a long moment. "Sergeant," he said finally, "your platoon has cleared 1,100 kilometers of route this rotation without a scratch. I am not sending you into that county alone." He signed the emergency leave packet, then kept writing. "Take the entire team, volunteers, emergency leave, my signature, my phone number on every packet. And Bellamy, do it your way. Slow, by the book. The book is what they think they own. That's an order." 8 of them went. They paid for their own tickets. Staff Sergeant Kona Iosefa, 260 pounds of Samoan patience who could read soil like scripture. Sergeant Cutter Boyle, the best heavy vehicle man in the battalion. Specialist Harlow Finch, 23, who flew mapping drones and talked to spreadsheets. Sergeant Malia Tuck, their medic. Corporal Ox Farrell, who'd been a tow truck operator in Georgia before the Army. And 2 more engineers, who asked to come before anyone asked them. They landed in Little Rock on a Thursday, rented 3 unremarkable trucks, and checked into the Wagon Wheel Motel out on Route 20, like a hunting party. Which, in the most legal sense available, they were. The first stop wasn't the crossing, it was the hospital, 2 hours before visiting hours ended. 8 strangers filling a pediatric hallway until a charge nurse came out to object, and then read the situation, and quietly didn't. Tobin knew them all by name from a year of Sunday calls in the background. Kona ducked under the doorframe and set on the blanket a route clearance platoon's oldest tradition, a strip of engineer tape signed by every member, the kind they tied to a bumper after a bad road ended well. "For after," Kona said. "Roads end, little man." Tuck read his chart cover to cover, then went and had a 40-minute conversation with his trauma surgeon that started polite and ended with the surgeon printing her everything. Orrin stayed after the others left, and Tobin, drifting on the evening meds, said the thing that reorganized his father's blood. "Dad, don't do anything that means you have to leave again." So the rules got written that first night, on wagon wheel stationery, in Orrin's block print, and taped inside every room door like a fire plan. 1. Everything legal. 2. Everything documented. 3. Everything boring. Nobody speaks to a prine. Nobody speeds. Nobody so much as jaywalks in Duell Pogues County. We are the most polite, most tedious men Arkansas has ever seen, right up until the paper does the fighting. Cotter's Mill noticed them anyway, of course. A deputy took to idling behind their trucks at the diner. Somebody keyed the word leave into Finch's rental. Judson Prine paid for their table's breakfast one morning without coming over, which in that family was a message with a return address. The team tipped well, waved politely, and measured things. Because here is what the Prinz fundamentally misunderstood. They thought they were dealing with an angry father. What got off that plane was a unit whose entire professional existence was finding the truth hidden in a road. And the road, as Orrin's father always said, keeps the receipts. They started at the crossing, at 5 a.m., before traffic. 8 soldiers with surveyor poles, photo scales, and Finch's drones gridding the intersection like an archaeological site. Route clearance mapping, the exact discipline they used to reconstruct blast scenes for forensic teams. 31 days old, the scene still testified. A gouge in the asphalt where the bike's pedal had dug in, glass dust in the seam, and, under a light rain of Finch's photogrammetry passes, the thing that mattered. 2 overlapping sets of tread prints in the soft September shoulder mud, identical lug pattern, opposite directions, the second set pressed deeper into the first. And between them, a bright arc of scraped clay where something had been dragged. The truck had come back. The mud agreed with the boy. Kona knelt at the shoulder for a long time, with a lug sole cast in his hands. "Same tire," he said. "Same axle weight." He backed up. "Sergeant, this is a reversing arc. There's no fog story here." Finch rendered the whole scene that night into a three-dimensional model accurate to a centimeter impact point inside the marked crossing, not outside it. Sightline analysis proving the crossing was visible for 210 meters even in fog, and a second acceleration scuff, rear-facing. A road language affidavit. The kind juries can walk through in 3D. The county wouldn't take it. Sheriff Pogue kept them in his waiting room for 2 hours, and then explained, gently, chair tipped back, that the case was closed and folks from out of state, he said it slow, shouldn't go measuring other people's roads. On the wall behind his head hung a framed photo of Pogue at a ribbon cutting, shovel in hand, next to Aldous Prine. So the team went where the county couldn't reach. Fern Aldana, an investigator with the National Insurance Crime Bureau whom Ox knew from his towing years, ran Prine Brothers through her databases and called back in one day with her voice sounding strange. 9 claims in 11 years. Rear-end collisions, brake check settlements, a bus of injured passengers, the classic swoop and squat, crash for cash, all of it paid quiet, all of it in Pogue's County, all of it reconstructed by the same retired deputy. "Gentlemen," she said, "this family doesn't just cover up accidents. They manufacture them. It's a business line." And then the conscience showed up, the way a conscience does. At night, at the motel, in a 50-year-old pickup. Erskine Dowd, 71, the Prince's yard mechanic since before Judson could shave. He stood in the parking lot turning his cap in his hands, and then handed Orrin a cardboard box. Work orders. Denton's truck, brought in the same September morning, before noon. New bumper guard, right headlight bezel, hood repaint, all logged by Ernie's own careful hand, all marked cash, no claim. Paint the color of a boy's bicycle still in the old bumper's scratch when Ernie pulled it. He'd kept the bumper. He'd kept everything, wrapped in a tarp behind his shed, for 31 days, waiting to see if anybody would come ask. He looked at Orrin and said the sentence that broke the case and maybe the town. "I fix what they break. Been doing it 30 years. I can't fix that boy." Moses' logbook said Denton's truck was in the yard all that morning. The truck's own electronic logging device, the black box federal law had welded into every commercial rig, which Mose had apparently never truly understood, said otherwise. Ignition at 5:58, the quarry gate at 6:22, 41 miles an hour southbound on Route 20 at 6:39, a full stop at 6:41, 19 seconds stationary, then reverse gear, 19 seconds, then reverse. CID came in through Captain Frey, a warrant officer named Barnaby Croft who specialized in crimes against soldiers' families and had the federal reach Pogue couldn't pocket. Trooper Sergeant Adelaide Munn of the State Crash Reconstruction Unit took one look at Finch's model and canceled her weekend. But building a case takes months, and the Preens could feel weather changing. Early had been asking around town, too casual, about how long them Army boys was staying. And on a Friday night, Orrin's phone lit again. "Aldous, second text. You don't listen good, son. Roads out here get slick for everybody, even soldiers." In the motel room, in the quiet, Cutter Boyle read it over Orrin's shoulder and smiled without any warmth at all. "Sergeant," he said, "they're going to try to give you an accident." Orrin looked at his team, at 8 people who walked roads for a living, and made the decision the whole story had been driving toward. "Then let's build them one," he said. "Ours. To spec." What followed was 2 weeks that looked, from the outside, like nothing at all. Croft flew down twice and built the legal architecture the way engineers build bridges: anticipatory warrant, consensual recording memos, a federal magistrate briefed in Little Rock, so that not one frame of what came next could ever be suppressed. Trooper Munn walked the grade with them at dawn on her day off, flagging exactly where state jurisdiction ran and where her units could legally sit, and the team rehearsed. 11 times, on a closed farm road Fern found them, Cutter played early in a junkyard sedan while Orrin ran the line. Brake, feather left, absorb, stop, until the maneuver lived below thought, in the hands, where training lives. Tuck drilled the extraction twice with a stopwatch. Finch flew the drone pattern so many nights the batteries developed opinions. It looked like paranoia. It was the opposite. Paranoia is fear without a plan, and this was a plan without fear. The route clearance method, applied to the only road that had ever really mattered. Assume the strike is coming, engineer the survivability first, and let the enemy choose the moment. They would only get one take. They built it so one take was enough. They did it the way they cleared routes, slow, redundant, and completely inside the law, with Croft and Munn signing off on every step, because the point, phrase order, repeated down every phone call, was not revenge. It was evidence. Ox and Cutter took Orrin's old F-250 into a friend's shop in Little Rock and built what route clearance builds best, a survivable vehicle. Roll cage tied into the frame, racing harness, reinforced rear members from a wrecked ambulance chassis, and instrumentation like a rolling laboratory, 6 cameras hidden in the trim, forward and rear radar off a crash test rig Fern borrowed, GPS logging at 10 Hz, every lens time synced. Finch put 2 drones on a racetrack pattern over the grade with infrared. Munn positioned 2 unmarked units at the bottom of the hill. Croft sat with a signed anticipatory warrant. Tuck staged an ambulance 2 minutes out, because Tuck planned for everything. Then Orrin gave the town's rumor mill 24 hours to do its work. He let it slip at the diner, loud, that he'd be driving down to Little Rock on Tuesday night to hand everything they had to the FBI. Alone. Down the grade. Tuesday, 9:12 p.m. The mud, the logbooks, the bumper, all of it long since copied and already in 3 federal buildings, because no soldier baits a trap with real ammunition. Orrin came over the crest of the grade at 40. Harness tight. Cameras hot. Route clear, said Finch in his ear, from a hilltop half a mile off. 2 vehicles inbound behind you. Here we go. They ran the family playbook. Early swung his pickup out of the quarry gate and passed Orrin fast, then braked hard across his nose. The squat. Denton came down behind in the gravel truck, lights off, closing to feet. The hammer. There to shove the stopped pickup truck and its driver through the guardrail into 60 feet of ravine, a tragic chain reaction on a dangerous road. Judson, careful Judson, was parked on the overlook with his phone out, ready to be the independent witness who saw the army man driving crazy. Physics is honest. That's the whole reason the Prinz had always needed a sheriff. Orrin didn't break into early. He'd rehearsed this line 11 times with Cutter. He feathered left where the shoulder had been walked and measured that morning. Took the glancing hit from Denton's bumper guard square on the reinforced rear corner. At a closing speed the radar logged to the decimal, and let the cage and harness do their jobs. The F-250 fishtailed, gripped, and stopped, upright, 40 feet shy of the rail. Denton's truck, meeting 1,100 pounds more resistance than any victim had ever given the family, spun its trailer across both lanes and stalled. Drones saw everything in infrared. 6 cameras saw everything in high definition. The radar had the closing speeds. The GPS had the brake check to the 100th of a second. And the state units at the bottom of the hill saw the whole choreography themselves, live, before lighting the grade up blue. Early was still explaining to a trooper that his brakes had locked up when Munn showed him his own ABS data. Denton went silent and stayed that way. Judson, on the overlook, filmed the arrests for 40 confused seconds before understanding arrived, at which point he attempted to delete the video on camera, which is its own federal charge. "We became their accident," Finch wrote that night to Captain Frey, in the shortest after-action report of his career. "Sir, route clear. The dominoes went down in order of guilt. Early flipped in 9 hours. Gave them the September morning entire. Denton screaming about the kid who'd seen his face at a rally the week before? No. Simpler and uglier. Denton half drunk at 6 a.m. The impact, and then the reverse. Denton's own idea, to see, and Early's laugh, nervous, the laugh of a small man next to a large cruelty. Gave them Aldous saying afterward, in the yard office, clean it up. The boy's father is deployed. Nobody investigates accidents. Gave them 9 years of staged crashes, names, dates, splits. The trials took a year, as trials do. Denton Prine. 2 counts of attempted murder, a 13-year-old at a crossing, a soldier on the grade, plus the September felonies. 61 years, federal and state stacked. Early 20. Testimony notwithstanding. Because you cannot laugh at a broken boy in a ditch and walk away light. Judson. Racketeering and insurance fraud. The whole 9-claim business unwound by Fern Aldana's files. 26 years, and the company forfeited. Mose. Falsifying federal transport records. 7. Aldous Prine, 80, heard both of his text messages read to a jury in his own lawyer's reluctant voice, and learned that solicitation and conspiracy do not require you to ever leave your porch. He will not leave federal custody alive. Sheriff Dual Pogue resigned in the spring and was convicted of obstruction and deprivation of rights under color of law. The new sheriff, sworn in that fall, was a former state trooper named Adelaide Munn, and Lorelei was offered a misdemeanor to explain the witness statement and refused, protecting nobody, since Early had already given everything away. Obstruction, 18 months suspended. Termination of custodial rights. Some things the law can't take from you, she said on the courthouse steps. She was right. She'd already given them away for free. 2 smaller scenes from that year deserve daylight. The first, Lorelei came to the hospital once, in October, after the arrests, with a stuffed bear and a lawyer's sense of timing. Tobin, 13 and wired to 3 machines, looked at his mother for a long moment, and then asked the nurse, politely, to note in the chart that he'd declined the visit, a sentence he'd practiced, his father learned later, with Malia Tuck. The second, in November the town held a meeting about the quarry's future, and half of Cotter's Mill packed the school gym expecting to be told, as always, what would happen to them. Instead, Wade Kanoski, back from Missouri for the trials, stood up with his bad shoulder and said, "We all knew, is the thing. Every one of us knew something." And nobody could find a way to say the second sentence, because there wasn't one. Towns don't get verdicts, they get mirrors. The quarry sold at auction to a co-op of its own drivers. Ernie Dowd runs the maintenance yard now. There's a rule there, hand-painted over his bench, that every driver knows: we fix what we break. The Route 20 crossing, where a truck once reversed to check, has a signal light, a camera, and a name. The Tobin Bellamy crossing, dedicated by the county on a Saturday morning, with 8 soldiers in dress uniform standing in the second row, none of whom would sit down front no matter who asked. Tobin walked again in March. Walker, then cane, then nothing but a hitch in the left step that the physical therapist swears will fade. In June, when Orrin's team rotated home for good, they brought him to the crossing at dawn, and Staff Sergeant Kona Aosefa handed the boy a surveyor pole, and 8 route clearance engineers walked the length of Quarry Road to Route 20 behind a 13-year-old with a hitch in his step, the way they'd walked 1,000 kilometers of worse road. Slow, eyes down, all the way to the far shoulder. At the end, Tobin turned around and looked at his father, and keyed the little radio they'd given him, and said the thing he'd been saving all year, this time at full volume. "Route clear, Dad." "Roger, bud," said Sergeant First Class Orrin Bellamy. "Route clear. So that's the story, and here's the part I can't shake. Every single thing the Prince counted on was real. The sheriff was bought. The county was cowed. The report was filed. The mother signed the lie. For 31 days, the machine worked exactly the way it had worked for 20 years. Right up until it met a team of people whose literal job description was finding what's buried in a road and refusing to drive past it. And notice what the revenge actually was. Nobody threw a punch. The army didn't roll into Arkansas guns up. 8 soldiers with surveyor poles, a mechanic's cardboard box, a black box the fraudster forgot he was legally required to carry, and one perfectly legal, perfectly instrumented drive down a hill. The road kept the receipts. They just finally made somebody read them. 2 real takeaways tonight. First, staged accident fraud, the swoop and squat, is a genuine industry. If a crash ever feels choreographed, photograph everything and call your insurer's fraud line, because patterns are what convict these crews. Second, every commercial truck in America carries an electronic logging device, and it does not lie for anybody. And one more thing. Somewhere tonight there's a kid whispering something through a hospital rail that nobody official wants to hear. Believe the kid. Measure the road. If this one landed, share it with someone who walks the road first for the people they love. I'm Nathan. Route clear. Good night.